morning, Aqua friends. Today we are going to do these beautiful citrus slices. I am starting wet on wet with my lightest colors and just dropping in our underpainting. Now, this is a very detailed painting that I'm making. It took me probably 4 to 5 hours. Obviously, I've sped up the video and edited a lot for you guys. But I just wanted to show you my process. So basically, I'm wetting first and dropping in the color. And I'm trying to get as close as I can to the reference photo. So I'm adding in more colors as I go along while it's still wet. And that is pretty much my process for all these slices, coming in with a very, very watery mixture and loosely just drawing in these random lines. I'm trying to get the texture, but it's very wet and it's just meshing together, as you can see. But there is a bit of a distinction there, so it's a good place to start for an underpainting. And I'm trying to vary my colors as I go along. So the grapefruits, some I have a little bit more peachy color, some are more pink. You know, varying for depth of color. So wetting the slices, and as I go, I'm turning my canvas so that I can paint one section while the other section dries. And that is another reason why it took me so long. It's like there's citruses on top of citruses and you have to wait for one to dry. So get yourself into a position where you can't paint anymore until they dry, because you're kind of running into one another. So that's the underpainting. Varying my oranges. Some of the oranges are more vibrant than others. Some of the colors that I used, I could tell you right now, I used Daniel Smith Transparent Pyrrole Orange. I used her Coral Sienna. I used Holbein's Quinacridone Scarlet, Quinacridone Red. I've used ISO Yellow Deep, and what else? Now for the lemon slices, you see it's kind of there's kind of a lot of shadowy spots. I actually mixed whatever purple I had on my palette with the yellow. The contrasting colors will produce a gray color. So these really thin slices of lemons I'm working on right now, I'm putting in a very light color, the shadow of the grapefruits, because you can see through those ones. So this is a very long, tedious job, getting in all the colors. I tell you, by the end of it, I was very, very sick of painting this. So now that it's dry, this is the detailed layer. Okay, we have our underpainting in place, and that's going to peek through and kind of like be the highlights of the citrus. So I'm varying my colors as I go along, letting sections dry, working on other segments, and just drawing in, as you can see, these random lines, these random sketchy areas. You know, some horizontal, some going the other way. And how I came about this is just really maximizing the screen on the reference photo and having a look at the lines and how they go, and they're quite chaotic. I mean, some are vertical, some are horizontal, and so I'm just taking that randomness and I'm trying to reproduce it by doing these random strokes that you see here, and varying the colors is important. So this is kind of like your texture layer, okay? I'm not worrying about shadows or anything like that. I'm just trying to get the colors in. And as you can imagine, like I said, I sped this up. So this is a very long process, but the end result is just beautiful. And I think it would make a lovely painting to hang in a kitchen, especially in the summertime. Okay, so this like basically dirty watercolor is what I was telling you. I mixed orange and purple together just to get this very faint, shadowy sort of color. One thing about watercolor too is you have to remember that it dries a lot lighter. So sometimes you have to compensate for that and you think, holy shit, I put way too much paint. It's just totally wrecked it. It's gonna be way too bright. You know, the tone is all off, but gotta remember that when it dries, it dries lighter. That's one thing also that's nice about watercolor is that you get to build up the values of the painting slowly, because it takes many layers, you know, probably in order to get the right value, especially for shadowy areas. So I'm going over that area with more pink where you can see the other citrus slice. Having this translucency effect, you won't be able to really get too well with other mediums. I think watercolor probably shows it the best, and that's a fun thing about watercolor. Seeing all these other layers. This color I'm using here is just pure, or was just pure ISO yellow. Kind of milky consistency. It's a really beautiful glowing yellow-orange color. And this citrus slice on the top here is quite vibrant. So I'm cleaning up my edges. A little bit of a sloppy painter, so just trying to make those edges of the slices a little more realistic. So now on this layer, I'm working on all the spaces between the slices as well as starting to paint the rinds. Adding the little dot textures in the rind. I hated that shadow there. It was a little too muddy, so I'm going over it with a brighter color. Okay, this is where I'm lifting, and I'm going just over the sections that I drew with the white to lift these segment areas. Ever so slightly, broken lines, doesn't have to be perfect. It looks a lot more realistic, cleaner. Doesn't have that chalky appearance. I don't use white very often. I'd rather use the white of the paper. So I'm just going over all my slices and using that scrubber brush. It's a very flat brush and very stiff, and I just keep re-wetting it using my tissue. Okay, and getting that white of the paper back. Okay, it looks a lot better that way. So as you can see, this isn't a simple painting where, you know, you could get this done in an hour. This takes many hours. You have to be patient and let the layers dry. I'm working on the rinds a lot more now. So towards the end of the painting, I'm basically color correcting, changing the values when I see that it needs to be darker or lighter. I also felt that the rinds, like things were just blending in too much and they weren't popping forward. So I ended up hypersaturating the rinds, and I think it really brought those top pieces forward. And sometimes you might have to step away from your painting a couple of days and think about it. Come back and sort of see things with a fresh eye. Now, out of all the fruit slices, I thought that one was pretty washed out, so I'm just going over it a little bit more, get it a bit brighter. value adjustments, getting that final vibrancy that I want out of some of these fruit slices. It's hard to know when to stop. It's hard to know, well, when is a painting finally done? I didn't like that shadow a lot. I worked over that shadow quite a few times. I was trying to pull forth a little bit nicer of a color. It was just a little too washed out. So I ended up going over the whole thing with the same color for consistency. That's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. See you next week.